Dom and Johnny in the morning. All right, so today we have a bit more of an abstract topic because we've done some more concrete things for the past few eps. We talked about like weapons training and demo teams. So today we are gonna talk about I want to say more reminders than anything that our teacher Ken talks about in terms of martial arts instructors, which is that really they need to be able to act, ACT, which is initials for they need to be an athlete, a community leader, and a teacher. So I think the two on the ends are the easiest to kind of summarize. Athlete, you don't need to be an NFL star, but also if you want your students to be able to do things, you need to be able to demonstrate them. If you can't do a crescent kick because your hips are super tight, how are you going to expect them to do a crescent kick? And there are reasonable limitations. So, for example, one of our instructors had an injury on his foot last week, so he wasn't going to do a lot of the fitness stuff. First of all, that was a temporary thing that he was taking the responsibility to fix. And, you know, we've had instructors before, let's say they had like a knee injury, right? That is like preventing them from showing things. Like, you can't expect them to like torque a pivot on their bad knee or something. And just know if you're the only instructor and you have a limitation like that, your students probably aren't going to have very good kicks because you can't demonstrate them properly. So that's the athlete part. And then the teaching part, which we talked a little bit about here or there, like the quality of how good you are as a teacher is reflected in the quality of your students. The middle one is the one that I think is really interesting right now because I know you've been doing a lot of work with the school that you own and operate now on being a community leader. So what does being a community leader mean?
You know, I don't think I've ever sat down and tried to define it.
Yeah.
At least, you know, for me, you know, being a community leader for me is being a dependable community resource. So already, I've only been in Marlboro for almost, I think, exactly a year now, and I've only been running the school as the owner for about a month and a half. So, but in that time, I've met and established relationships with most of the small businesses in the downtown area. I try and do all of my, you know, shopping for the business locally. So all my print is done locally. My signs are done locally. I have sweatshirts, zip-down sweatshirts being made that are done locally. Even for our grand opening, the coffee is from a local coffee shop. And I go down there and I chat with them, and I'm on the boards like the Chamber of Commerce in Marlboro. We have a Downtown Village Association, which is like a group that gets together and discusses how they can make downtown better.
Yeah.
But they do a lot of events. They host events. They do beautification projects. It's pretty cool. So, and I'm on that board as well. So I get to spend some time in the community, you know, really establishing good relationships. So when people see me, they see, I'd like to hope they see a friend and a colleague. And I think that really helps from an owner's perspective, because if someone tells any one of those guys that they are looking for martial arts, I am 98% sure they will say, "Hey, I know a guy." But that's like the fringe benefit,
right?
Because the real benefit is that I'm in the community and serving it, and people feel like they can depend on me and trust me. So we had a farmer's market a couple weeks ago, and they were down a helper. So I've been to the farmer's market as a vendor, but they reached out, and I responded back, and I said, I have time. This was before the instructor training. So I went there, and I handled SNAP benefits. And I was sitting there, you know, working with the SNAP benefit team, you know, and it was awesome. You know, and that got me nothing in return. I didn't even wear a Valari's shirt.
Yeah.
I think I was wearing a shirt that said, like, Boston on it. But, you know, it makes me feel good when I can do something And I feel like that's, the samurai way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the ideal samurai way,
Yes.
like we've talked about, sometimes the mythology and the history are a little, they diverge a little, but what is interesting though is you say there's not like a benefit in that you weren't like advertising for the school wearing your apparel or anything like that. One of the things I've paid attention to as like a studio operator is how much the things that you don't think would be a benefit actually are. So, for example, there is visibility and recognizability in the fact that you're living your talk. So, one of the things a lot of martial arts schools advertise is we do character development and we teach discipline and respect, and they're buzzwords that people associate with the martial arts, but there's not really specific examples a lot of time that come up, or are used in the advertising. It's more for like search engine optimization. You're demonstrating it, like you're living the talk. And so not only can people recognize you as just a familiar face, it is interesting when we have people walk into our space for the first time. There's not anything in particular that we can point out to be like, this is why they're calm. I mean, we did pick the paint color of our lobby and the color of our mats intentionally to have that kind of calming effect. But energetically, what they usually cite is just talking to the people. There tends to be this just kind of calming effect. When you live with community leader integrity, it makes it easier for you to be calm and confident. And so when people talk to you, there's nothing specific to point to where it's like, my body language was this way. But they do get the sense that, you're living a life with integrity. And that makes it so much easier for them to buy in to things that you truly believe. So that the martial arts has all of these both self-defense but also life integration benefits.
Absolutely. And I think even beyond that, there's the actual services we provide the community too. You guys do multiple food drives, right, throughout the year?
Yeah. We just are kind of connected to social media. So when the soup kitchen posts, oh no, we don't have food, we make sure to host an impromptu food drive. A lot of our students, because in order to get their black belt, they have to volunteer their time to somehow benefit the community. A lot of them help with the soup kitchen. In fact, a lot of them loved it so much they still volunteer. It's not, like sometimes you'll see that for high schools where it's like you have to volunteer as a senior or whatever. And it's sort of like a check the box type of thing. But the difference is we're not trying to connect them to what they should be doing. We're trying to get them to connect to a feeling of why they should do it. And so many of them just continuously volunteer and really, like you, working for the farmers market, a lot of our students walk the talk that we want them to. So again, it's not something where we're just saying it. Like, we have a lot of students who are living it, which I think is way better advertising than having a banner or a handout or a flyer or something,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The black belt, the black bar
Yeah.
assignment, that's a great example. It's not even just for the teachers, but, we expect our students going for black belt to have some level of community service experience.
Yeah. So we have, as part of the rank progression, we have our students on the left sleeve of their uniform top have a patch, which are their character connections bars. And they're colored just like the belt colors. It starts at yellow, goes all the way up through black. And each of the bars has a mission assignment connected to a character lesson we'd like them to learn. Some of them, like one of them is respect, one of them is responsibility, which are usually associated with the martial arts. The first one we identify is just choices. Like, can you identify the choices that you have and which is the most respectful or kind one to make? And then we've got respect, mindfulness, curiosity, responsibility. The black bar is effort and contribution. And the idea, and there's actually a point in their rank progression, and I have several students stuck there right now, where yes, from a martial arts perspective, there's not more curriculum for them to learn, and their physicality has demonstrated they're ready for the next rank. But around green belt, we're like, you can't test again unless you have through your green character connections bar first, because we want to make sure that we're not promoting merely on physicality, we're also promoting based on character. If we want a certain student to hold a high rank in our school, we want to make sure their character reflects the standards we want from them. And so the black bar is the most intense of them all. The mission really has to do with a 21st century learning model. There are many C's now. When we first designed it, there were 4. There was communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. So collaboration and communication were reflected in both, they have to write thank you notes to people who have helped them on their martial arts journey, to recognize the fact that they did not achieve their black belt alone. And also a community service project, which has to do with their contribution, like helping at a farmer's market is a perfect example of that. But also they have to communicate a plan for their community service to us. So the idea that today's, in our information age, the workplace really demands communication as like the top skill, and not just mindless communication, like comprehensive, digestible, and then following it up with actions and choices to show that you're not just saying things, you'll actually do it. And then they have a creative project, could be anything. Really the idea, they don't have to be brilliant artists to, be a little creative, but the idea is to just help make sure that they're thinking in terms of being well-rounded. Because how many times, especially with teenagers, do they fix their identity to like a certain thing, like I'm the one that's good at math, but I'm bad at language arts, so it just helps remind them that they always have a potential to grow. And then you do sometimes get artists that produce amazing work. I think my favorite was we had one student do a stop motion Lego video of them like training at the dojo with little Lego people. Very cool. And then the critical thinking is an essay, because again, I think what the essay helps do is just teach them to organize their thoughts, which is what teachers need. They need to organize their thoughts. So
this is a bit of a off topic, but I wrote my essay 20 years ago.
Yeah.
When I was going up for my black belt, and when I came back after a little hiatus, I wrote another essay.
Oh.
And I did it because I kind of wanted to dig deep. And sometimes when you just think about what it means to you, you get you get one thread of thoughts. But when you start putting it on paper, and you really plan out an essay and write it, you start to realize, you start to really dig deep and find out what you really want. And it's neat. So off topic, but if you've written a black belt essay many moons ago, always fun to rewrite one. And if you can get a copy of your original and see how you grew, that's always pretty cool too.
Do you remember any specific insights that came out of writing the second one?
Yeah. It helped me realize what I wanted to do in the martial arts. So I knew that I wanted to teach.
Yeah.
And I knew that I had an idea that I wanted to open up a school one day. But that was a very shaky plan.
Right.
And writing the essay didn't just give me the what, but it gave me the why.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't have the why, there's no drive behind it. So, and when I wrote the essay, I really found a lot of the why. I didn't just want to teach because I wanted a job I liked going to.
Yeah.
That is a great reason, but there's, the multitude of reasons stacked up, and I think it really lights a fire under you about why this was the place for me. Why I'm on the right path, and it even gave me kind of a trajectory too. So it wasn't just I want to own a school. It's I want to own a school and beyond and far and how I wanted to get there. So the black belt essay really helped a lot. And I think even if you sat down and rewrote one, once every couple of years, I feel like it would have huge benefit.
Do you have like drilling down into why? Like what about the second why made it deeper than the first?
Well, I got my black belt when I want to say I was 18.
Yeah.
18, 19, something like that. And I think I just had a very different attitude about the martial arts in general. Because I was really quick to repeat the personal growth and development, creed, but I don't think I truly believed that. In my heart, I wanted to be the ultimate martial artist, the ultimate weapon, and it was just a different way of thinking back then. And I wanted to turn my students into weapons, and then, now, just 20 years later, it's just, it's different. I don't want to turn kids into weapons. I do want them to learn how to defend themselves, but I want to help mold them into the people that I think deep inside they even know they can be, or maybe don't know they can be yet. But, they think that, maybe their goals are too far away and they don't realize what they're capable of. And I think our job is to just take that untapped potential and just open the spigot. So, writing the essay for the second time, I think I discovered more about how I feel about the martial arts too. And just, that gave me direction of how I wanted to be a teacher, and even how I wanted to go about being a community leader.
Yeah. Well,
to circle back.
And I think when we break that term down, community leader, we've been talking more in a macro scale. So it's how we, as operators of a small business, interact with a broader community, like more regionally. So you're talking about the coffee shop down the street or your local printer. We use a local printer as well who used to train with us. But then there's how you're a community leader within the community of your school. And one of the toughest parts of leadership is support. So community leadership has this almost paradox where you need to be able to model what you expect of your students. So in one sense, you have to be seen. It's really hard to contribute to a community and really role model if you're not seen. But on the other side of it, there is this Zen practice of leave no trace, or you plant a seed for a tree under which you'll never sit. So the idea being that there's a threshold where you have to be the role model that people look up to and see, but also you can't be the star of the show. Or when you're teaching, you can't be the hero of the story. You have to be the mentor that is a character in somebody else's story. So when it comes to being a community leader in the internal community, part of that is supporting your students on their journey of how they can become community leaders. Which is why I bring up the students that do work at the soup kitchen, because they're doing a lot more direct volunteering than I am in that sense. That being said, my sister and I we spend a lot of time going to local schools and stuff for free, really volunteering just so that we can, usually teach seminars on the 5 animal mindsets to give younger elementary and middle school students some language to help them identify their own behaviors and strategize a little more intentionally. So we do a lot. And leadership is this funny thing because you're constantly negotiating which side you're on. Are you more in leading from the front, or are you taking a step back so that your students have room to figure things out for themselves? Sometimes they get stuck and you need to go and you got to yank them out of getting stuck. But there are other times it's good to let them, struggle a little bit. They learn the lesson a little more when they have to figure it out for themselves. And the other part of this, I think, is the culture of your school is often reflected by the energy you contribute to it as like the head honcho person. When you're thinking of your school, which you said you haven't been there in this role very long, are there cultural traits that you wish to see blossom at your dojo?
Just especially just the fun, friendly energy that the kids have here in Mansfield, where they're not coming in. So right now I noticed there's a little bit of closeness in class, but when the junior class comes into the dojo, they all go in separate directions, and it's interesting.
Your dojo or this one?
The lobby in Marlboro.
In Marlboro, okay.
They'll all go separate directions, and they all do their own thing, and then they kind of come to class, and there's a little bit of community, but not just that. And you come here, and it's like everyone's best friends. Even the junior beginners, they're so excited to talk to each other, and they're friends. And I think that's going to happen eventually. But I want them to be able to think of their classmates as their friends, because I feel like that was one of the best experiences I had growing up, was having so many friends here. It wasn't like, oh, I got to go to karate. It was, and I enjoyed karate, but there's always things like, I enjoyed music lessons too, but sometimes I didn't want to go. Sometimes I just wanted to hang out with my friends, but my friends were on karate,
right?
And that was the coolest thing, and that was the community, And when I went out with my friends, I was going out with karate people, especially as we got older, and it's still that way. And I still go out to eat with Master Stephanie. I'll still hang out with you and your sister Stephanie. Yeah. And it's that, I think, is that part of the community, I think, is something I really would like to bring in. And I think that ends up growing into community leadership. Just being able to establish, a community first.
That's a really interesting dynamic to point out, because you're not wrong, but the Rubik's part of me is trying to figure out why and how. So why does there seem to be that feeling in our junior beginner class? Because it's when you're talking about like brown and black belts, those are people who have stuck around for it long enough because they love the game. So that there's like a common thread in that, like, we love martial arts enough that we've gotten to this advanced level. Also, there's so much fewer of them in number. It's easier to kind of, have that kind of camaraderie. Where, you're helping each other along and you're seeing the same faces over and over again. The beginners is a lot more interesting because they haven't been there that long. So what's going on underneath the surface where that energy is there from the beginning?
I would, just a theory, I would be willing to bet it's just the fact that we don't have a ton yet. So because there's so few beginners, and so because we have a small, humble school at the moment, I think there's enough degree of separation. Here, two people may not be friends in karate, but they both have friends in karate that are friends. And it pulls the group together. And, here when I have a lobby and, maybe there's 6 juniors, I think in total we have 9 juniors. So it's not big. It's small. Right. It's very small. And, some classes, usually it's anywhere between 3 and 6 is normal. Yeah. So, and I don't think there's enough students where you can get that degree of separation. So that might just blossom on its own.
Right. Well, and also I was thinking, because one of the analytics I pay attention to are things like, how many new students are trials, what's the percentage of people who try martial arts that actually end up enrolling and continuing. Like, I'm looking at all these things, and I was looking through our student registration forms to see what aspect of our advertising was the thing working. So for a while, it was simple Google searches. Like, when it was a new student, it's like, how did you hear about us? And the answer pretty consistently was, I just Googled martial arts and you came up. and you were close. So, you know, and that's fine. And what I found really interesting from our latest kind of bubble of students starting together is a lot of them came because we did a buddy week. So where, you know, a friend who already trains invited them to a free class and did martial arts alongside them. So you already have pre-built friendships starting. So because of that, I wonder if that's why there's that sense of like friendship right off the bat, is because they already were before they came here. So that's not to say people don't become quick friends at karate. I think part of it is even at the beginner level, first we use a lot of equipment and weird fun toys that they don't get to play with other places, you know, like blockers and focus pads and kick shields. Like it's fun to hit stuff together. I also wonder how much of it has to do just with the class structure of splitting into groups. So, you know,
That's possible.
We have a rare benefit in that our school has a teaching team. So, you know, sometime throughout class we'll usually divide the class by different ranks. So like all the orange belts go with this person, all the yellow belts go with that person. So you get some time to kind of sit and have fun with just a few people. It makes it easier to get to know the same faces over and over again and build a bond. Again, like yours, I think that's just a theory. A karate theory. But yeah, it's just that was really interesting to point out because I think I knew it, but I just hadn't thought it through that way before.
And if we circle back to the community leader point, it may be a monkey see, monkey do thing too.
That's true.
Because here, they'll see 4 or 5 instructors. We clearly are all friends. You know? So that's probably like you could be friends at karate.
Back to role modeling.
Yeah.
I think on the role modeling bit, the word that comes to mind when it comes to the culture I wanted from my students when I started thinking about it on that level was whimsy. Whimsy. Because one of the things I've just noticed from martial artists, especially going to clinics for a lot of years, is a lot of them will be like, yeah, we're having fun. But it was such a serious version of fun. Where it's like, it's so important we relax and smile. And it's like, even though there's an enjoyment, there's also kind of like a tightness, you know, but like energetically. And it's something where I'm like, yeah, you keep saying to relax, but are you? Like,
it's because they don't have a black belt club.
Showcase. Well, and that's whimsy. You know, like it's how do you let them have a lot of fun and not take themselves seriously, but do treat their practice sincerely, you know? So, and that's a fine line to walk that I've definitely tripped on it multiple times.
Well, I think community leadership and humility kind of walk hand in hand. But the reason we were talking about that was because sometimes we forget that, as you know, when we say roll with the punches, we don't just mean the punches. You know? You gotta learn to not be so serious, because especially if you're running a school or if you're trying to be a community leader, you gotta know that things are not always gonna go your way.
Right.
And sometimes, you know, your ego's gonna take a hit. And that's when we shine. You know, that's when we shine. Put me in a hairnet and have me scoop some soup. You know, sometimes you gotta do it. And, you know, you feel good about it. You know, when you can just drop the ego and just do it and have fun helping people. I think that's huge.
Dom and Johnny in the morning.